This episode of the Design Your Dream Home podcast is brought to you by Porcelanosa. With 30 showrooms in the United States and Canada, Porcelanosa is a luxury lifestyle brand that'll make your next project's dream into a reality. From a wide selection of tiles and mosaics to modern bathroom and kitchen cabinetry designs, Porcelanosa makes it easy to bring modern European design elements into your home. Visit porcelanosa-usa.com to learn more. You are listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. Doug and Steve are architects, and they're here to help you design your dream home.
Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. We were on a conference call yesterday, you and I and someone else, and sort of talking about the future of this podcast and going forward, and also potential of making some videos. So that all looks like it's pretty good. I think that we had one sponsor in the beginning of the year, and now we've got a second, call them more of a partner, but it's great that people are, I think, liking what we're doing and want to help us and continue to sort of develop more good content for homeowners.
Yeah, well, I can hardly believe anybody's listening, actually, but I'm glad they are, and I guess the sponsors think we're doing something right, so it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you know, with these kinds of things, you go by numbers, and I said, I'm not really interested in numbers. I'm really focused more on, and it's hard to know this, but quality kind of listeners, people that it's really more important to find the right types of listeners as opposed to just getting big numbers. I mean, that was never our goal. And I think, we'll continue to do what we do. And I think that, we've gotten some good feedback and how to make sure we're on track. I think that there's one guy that wrote in, and I was really appreciative of his email. I shared it with you, talking about reinforcing that this is not just about architects and for architects, but really should be for homeowners, and that's what makes us different from so many design podcasts, which are more focused on basically insiders talking to insiders, and this is what we want to avoid. So I think that this person, I think it was Reed, his name was Reed. He gave made some good comments, and we will work to make sure that we, while introducing our guests, that we are always thinking about trying to provide resources and content that are helpful to homeowners. So we will sort of reinforce that point. So thank you very much for writing your thoughtful email, and we will work on that.
It's hard for architects, as you know, not to be self-absorbed.
Yeah.
So we're going to work hard not to be.
The other thing, so what we're talking about is a potential, I think it's going to happen now. So it's a partnership with CRAN. This is the Custom Residential Architects Network, right?
Yes, sir. Knowledge community of the AIA.
So a lot of their content is resources for architects, and that's great. And I think what we wanted to stress to them is that we want to create content that's aimed at homeowners and trying to provide resources which are there out there to help people that want to work with architects or build their own home or what have you. There is a resource, we haven't really talked about it yet, but on our website that you created, it's a checklist. We just sort of put it out there. We haven't really talked about it. Do you want to talk about that? That's one of the first things that we've done aimed at helping homeowners. It's kind of a free giveaway. And do you want to talk about where they came from?
Yeah, gosh, 10 years ago or so, I started working on a book, and that was kind of part of the book. And what I've found over the years, even for me, is that as you're working on a home, you tend to work on the things that are enjoyable to you. And the challenge there is that there may be other things that kind of get by, and you don't make decisions on. You don't really think about it. One of the problems I would say with simply hiring a contractor to design and build your home is that there are a lot of decisions that are going to be made for you. And I mean, down to the doorknobs or the thickness of the doors that you're using, or whether or not they're hollow core, whatever's in the budget is what he's going to be buying for at times, rather than perhaps discussing it with you. And there are tons of decisions like that. And so I put together this checklist, and it's over 200 items that you want to think about when you're designing your home. So you can run through the whole thing in an hour or two and get a sense for, and quickly get a sense for things I'm sure that you would be missing had you not really given it any consideration. So again, it's for just about anybody who's considering putting up their own home and doing the design work on it. And I think it's a great resource. I'm sure I'm missing a few things here or there, but I actually sent it out to a bunch of architects when I was working on it years ago, and they had some great additions to the thing. So anyway, check it out, download it. It's totally free.
Yeah, so that's on our website, right?
Yes.
I should know. That's on our website. It's for free. So, please download that if you're considering, going to this undertaking, designing or building a new home or renovating, whatever it is. But I think it's a useful checklist, and I think that we'll build on that. I think you have something more expanded that you're working on as well. So, but in the meantime, this is a great starter point. So this is something that's definitely aimed at homeowners, and hopefully can help them. So Doug, again, we didn't have a guest this week. I think it was more about trying to figure out, you and I just talking to each other and make sure that we know where we're going. And, when we did this, we said that, what are we doing? And let's sort of figure out what we're trying to do and what we're, why we're doing it. And I think we sort of have a better feeling for it. And I feel like there's people that are liking what we're doing.
Yeah, in the beginning, you and for years I've been putting together content, and early on I didn't really think about what I was doing. I actually started with a video about how to write like an architect, because I was working with a young guy on a website, and he saw me with all this. He saw me putting together all this hand lettering, and he thought, wow, man, you should make a video and post it on this thing called YouTube. And I was like, YouTube? That's not going anywhere. That'll never last. Right. So, but apparently it has. Right. It's done really well. But, that's how all these videos started. And in the beginning, I think I attracted architects to the channel based on some of this handwritten stuff and whatever, but I've tried over the years to appeal to a kind of broader audience because it can be an esoteric field, and it's not something that everybody's interested in. But everybody lives in a building, hopefully, somewhere, or most people do anyway. And there's a lot to know relative to what we do. And, the challenge here for us and for the general public is that, we watch these programs that condense 6 months of work or 9 months of work into 15 minutes. And it's really not like that. And I know everybody knows that. We talk about this all the time. But we still all are kind of blown away by that. And it really changes our perception about what is possible and what we can do. And so I think we're here to kind of add to that information.
Yeah, no, that's it's a really good point. I mean, it's interesting because people they can hire an architect, and you can engage an architect and work on this long process, or maybe there's something more just about answering questions or consultation or something. I don't know. There's something in between where I feel like there's just more. I wish I could find a way to help more people, and I think that's why we sort of hatched this plan. I mean, it's great to have a client and work with them on a house over a long period of time, but then there may be people that just have a couple of questions, and just going on Google and searching around, maybe it's not the greatest place to go. And there are lots of podcasts with contractors and builders.
Yeah.
And we just have a different perspective. It's coming from a different angle, and so we looked at all these other podcasts of other architects, and I mean, a lot of them are really interesting, and some of them are very esoteric, some of them are really inside baseball, and you and I have tried really hard to find that, how to connect with non-architects, you with YouTube, and doing amazingly well with that for a long time. I know you've sort of spent less time in that more recently, but initially you were kind of the guy. And then with me with TV and PBS and doing that, and of course now PBS is not in great shape. So always sort of thinking and searching out how to do things. Something has just sort of come on my desk, and we were just talking about beforehand. There's this HGTV program. It's I don't know, one of the bigger ones, and it's coming back. And apparently it's very popular. And so now they're looking for some designers, architects, builders. I think it's an ensemble cast. And so I say, geez, do we try to get in there? And
oh man, these old man faces. Holy cow.
Well, no. Do we try to go in there and have sort of represent our side a little bit? I mean, it's really hard, but I sort of always think that maybe if you're part of this cast and you become, I don't know, something very positive, and I don't know, stay out of the fray and all of that. I don't know. I always maybe I'm too idealistic, but some way to get in there and be kind of I can imagine designers yelling and builders and fighting and all of that kind of stuff going on, and maybe I can help referee that, or I don't know what. I'm going to look into it a little bit because I tried.
Bring me along.
It failed, and maybe I kind of get how this works a little bit better, and I kind of know. I have a feeling for what they're looking for, and I think I can. You're right about the old thing, but
yeah. Well, I have an idea here. Actually, I'm not even sure. Let me talk about it here. So, I made a video a couple months ago, and it was the How to Architect Mentor program. And so what I asked was people to send in a note, 500 words or less, and tell me why you could use a mentor. And so I ended up getting 2,500 views in maybe the first 3 weeks to a month. Not a whole lot, but I ended up getting a lot of letters and notes from people.
Really?
And some of them were really thoughtfully written. So I got there were about 45 that were really well done, under 500 words.
45?
45.
People writing?
Dude, I'm not kidding you.
1 or 2 page essays to you?
So 500 words or less. So at first I said, well, I'm going to take 5 of these people and I'll mentor them for 6 months, once a month. And the more I read these, these letters just kept coming. It was unbelievable. And I thought, this is insane. I can't pick 5 people. I'm going to pick them all. So there were probably, let's call it 70 entries, but there were about 45 that were really thoughtful. And so I took those 45 and I emailed every one of them back, and I said, sign up. So Calendly is the website I used for signups. It's free. And I set a schedule that I do 3 interviews on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 2 interviews on Mondays and Thursdays, and 1 on Friday. And I've done a little over 20 already. And the majority of these people really just need somebody to sit down and talk to for 1 hour. Now, this is all really relative to architecture, but it's not exclusive to architecture. What I said in my video was, even if you're if you're thinking about becoming an architect, thinking about changing careers, or you just want to talk about your career relative to design. Anyway, I have met the most amazing people from all over the world, and I've only had I probably had 3 or 4 from the United States. Everybody else is from somewhere else. Mongolia, Africa. I mean, just insane. And they're all just these wonderful people, and they just need somebody to talk to. So anyway, I'm telling you this story because wouldn't it be kind of cool if I could put a video together and say, we're doing the Doug and Steve podcast, and if you've got a question about your home, or you want to talk about the design of your own home, come on. We'll bring you on the show. Maybe we schedule 1 or 2 people for our shows, and we can just have a discussion with them. Maybe people would be interested in listening. The one thing I've learned from this is that there are a lot of people out there with lots of questions and that just need somebody to talk to. And it's been unbelievable. I mean, the response was amazing.
Wow.
So anyway,
Doug, this is what Ashton and I think are both learning, is that when we go away for a week or two, you create some project, a movie, a documentary, a website, a teaching academy. And sometimes you say, oh, yeah, last week I created a teaching academy. It failed. It's done. I killed it. Or I created a documentary. It's got 5 million views. We have no idea. I just know that every time we talk, that's going to be something. And then I feel bad. I say, oh, I mowed the lawn last week. I don't know. I did some red lines in my blueprints. That's about it. I feel bad.
I wouldn't feel bad. I've just got to stay busy.
No, it's always impressive.
So
I'm always impressed.
I apologize. The vacuum cleaner's going in the background. So.
No, I'd love to do that if we can have somebody come, guests or multiple, or I mean that's what we're trying to do. So
yeah,
it's funny. I think that I learned this from a lot of the podcasts I listen to on other subjects, and it seems the ones that I really like a lot are the ones that, I don't know, they find out something and then they're happy to share it. And you think, oh, but you're giving it away for free. And I don't know, I just, I don't sort of look at it like that. I think that you become invested in that person, and yeah, eventually maybe you want to seek something out, or there's a book, or I don't know what, but I always sort of think of it more like it's a focus on creating good content, sharing it, being a good resource. I mean, ultimately, you and I both want the built environment to be better. And maybe you and I will not profit from every single thing that gets done, but it's just more that if the dialogue is sort of raised and everything is just elevated, that's better for all. And if you and I can do something, I think that's something positive. That's great. I mean, it makes me feel good. I mean, you and I are a little older now, so I don't know, maybe we're not as, I don't know if it's competitive is the right word, but we're not really sort of trying to hoard everything. I think that you and I, we both learned from so many different people. I continue to learn from a lot of different people, and I'm not really giving them anything. I think I'm always excited when we have people on our show that are guests that are happy to share great information with us. So I'm basically getting lots of advice, and lots of the questions we ask are things because we're interested, and I learn a lot from those guys. And I don't know, I find it much better when we're kind of open like that and freely sharing information. And that's been something that I've really taken away from this podcast, and it's a good lesson just kind of going forward. So like you, there are some people in my local town that have kids that want to become architects, or they want to know about it, and the high school guidance counselor has no idea. And so, I give some advice. I've given some, for example, of, their high school junior or senior, I say you really should take a summer course in architecture. A lot of the colleges have these 4-week courses called discovery courses. I think that's a really good way to test something. I mean, with school being so expensive these days, it's really hard to say, well, why don't I just study this and get there? And really, this is not what you want. Better to take a 4-week course at a college in the summertime and between your high school, junior, senior years. And maybe that's a place where you say, yes, this is for me, or no, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be like. And, for example, so those are the kinds of things that, that I'm happy to help people just because we've been through it. And, I would hate to have someone go into our field thinking it's something else and not realizing that it's, it's difficult. It's maybe not as well paying as they thought, or maybe I don't know. There's a lot of things that you probably don't really get when you sort of imagine what the job is like. And so I'm always happy to help, especially younger people, with advice.
I think I think all of us tend to lose track of the things we can help people with because they're common knowledge to us. Oh, I had a conversation with an owner yesterday, and I had met with his wife about a week earlier, and we were out in the field and we were looking at the facade of their home, and she said, we just bought the house and we're settling in a month, and we really want to change it. We want to change the look of the home. What can we do? And so I started at the top and I worked my way all the way to the bottom. And I talked about the dormers and the roof material and the siding and the windows and configurations and colors. And then we talked about the gable and talked about a porch addition. And we talked about the front entrance and changing the garage doors. Anyway, but I used all these different terms. Then I ended up talking with her husband yesterday, and we were talking about the eaves and the soffits and rafter tails and outriggers, and I got done talking with him, and he said, "I have no idea what you were talking about." And I said, "Well, this is great. These are all the things. This is the reason you hire an architect, and I'm going to show you pictures of all these things. And by the time we're done talking, you're going to understand what the options are for you." So this is what architects do. And I think we lose sight of the stuff that we know because it's so obvious. It's right in front of us. But most people don't know about these things, know what they're called, know that we can change them. So anyway, that's what I've gotten out of this.
No, and it's when you have to teach something to somebody, that's when you realize you really need to know it inside and out, and you need to find the right language to be able to express those or to describe what it is that you're talking about. And architects are notoriously bad at that. There's a certain language called archispeak, which we talked about, where architects really enjoy talking to other architects and using a very elevated language. We make up lots of words too that I'm not sure they're in the dictionary, but they sound great. And what I found is that over time, it's like the best are the ones that can communicate with all different types, including some very famous architects that I interviewed for that TV program I did. I found that they were able to shift easily into different ways of communicating. If it was to an Ivy League audience of students, they could sort of elevate, or if it was to, I don't know, a homeowner or a board, they could sort of shift, I don't want to say down, but just change the language so that it was more understandable and comprehensible. And so now I'm teaching at local university, and so they're seniors, and there's so many things that I just assume that they know that they don't know. And I need to find ways to lead them to solutions, but I hate to give the solutions. Some of them, I think that they wait for me to with tracing paper, kind of solve the problem. And actually, usually, mostly, they're not difficult to solve, but it's like, I mean, you want me to design your building, or are you going to design it yourself? So the trick is to figure out how to kind of give them some clues and then lead them in the right direction. And so I think about this, how to talk to people, how to explain things, and it's the same with a homeowner. So I think we tend to kind of forget who we're talking to, that there's maybe a very different kinds of base of knowledge, and we need to find different ways to communicate. And this is something that we talk about all the time. I think we're getting better at it, and I'm having much better interactions with clients than I would had, let's say, when I was 30. I thought that they'd be impressed with lots of big words and actually not realizing they have no idea what I'm talking about and not doing a great job communicating. And now I think it's a little bit better in terms of trying to understand what they're looking for, how we can design something that'll make their, what they're looking for, what they want, which will make their lives better, all of these kinds of things, and finding the right language to communicate. So I think that's something that you and I, we talk about a lot, and that's what this podcast is for. So, if we're not connecting or communicating properly, you got to let us know, and we'll do our best to kind of continue to update and get better at it.
Right on. Yeah, send mean emails.
How do people do radio for like 4 hours? My voice is like gone after half an hour. I don't know how people do these things.
It's because you're old, Stephen.
Because I'm old. You know what I found also is like with the students, I just say, give me a big pencil, big fat pencil, like a big red pencil, colored pencil. I say, let's stop not too much talking. Let's just draw together, and we draw on the paper together. And I just, it's
like a dance on the ice.
I got it from listening to a sports podcast having to do with instruction, and how a newer philosophy is less verbal cueing, meaning do this, put your arm here, put your leg here, and it's really hard to process information and then translate it into a physical activity. And it's better that if you see what the issue is and then ask them to perform a certain drill that might remedy that issue without talking about it. Just say, you know what, why don't we do this drill? And so I keep thinking about without the kids, and I say, hey, maybe with the plan, do this, and sort of drawing for them and trying to explain how they should do something. Instead, I say, you know what, why don't we take a cross section, draw 2 cross sections for me, and I'll talk to you about half an hour. And I give them a task and let them work on the task and let them sort of say, something like this. I don't know, I'm working on it, I'm experimenting, but this is something that, trying to explain the answer all the time, describe the way to get there. Maybe that's not the best way. Maybe it's more like, okay, I see what the issue is. This person doesn't really see three-dimensionally. And instead of always working in the floor plan, I want you to work in either elevation or section. And I'm not going to talk you through it. I just want you to draw two sections, cross sections through the building, in two different directions. And then I'll talk to you, in half an hour. Let me see what you have. And often they say, "Oh, that I saw it in a different way. Now I kind of understand, and now they can kind of go without me sort of drawing the solution, and rather just say, why don't you just look at it a different way?" So I'm working on it. I mean, it's interesting to learn from another space, not architecture, but teaching, but with sports instruction, athletic instruction, try to sort of see how some of the more progressive coaches are trying to experiment using other methods. That is less verbal cueing and more assigning maybe a drill because they see something, and it's very hard to process verbal instruction translated into something physical. I think that's what they're saying. It's sort of
have you read The Inner Game of Tennis?
I've not read The Inner Game of Tennis. I've read a book called Bounce, which is sort of about tennis.
No. So The Inner Game of Tennis talks a little bit about that. So the inner game is really all about the two voices that all of us have in our heads at all times. So you go out to play tennis. One of the voices is, you can do this. It's going to be great. You're going to win. Let's go. And the other one's like, you suck. You don't belong out here. You're not nearly as good as that other person. You're going to lose. So we all have those two voices. And they're maybe more pronounced when you're talking about performance or sports, things like that. But we all have to deal with that. Anyway, one of some of the thinking in the inner game that the author talks about is watching pros play tennis and then playing tennis. So your brain really does pick up visually how a game is played, regardless of whether or not you think you're learning something. And, I've talked to people who love tennis and they love to watch pros play and then go out and play sports, but go out and play tennis, and they feel like they play better. And they actually do play better because they're watching people that really know what they're doing do it. So it's, the thinking is kind of along the same lines, but it's a really neat book. And it's about getting better at doing just about anything. It's not about just tennis, the ideas relate to everything in life. So
have you found that the best, let's say, designers, practitioners don't make for the best teachers?
Wow. I've definitely found that the teachers that don't practice are ones that I would rather not listen to.
There's a balance there.
I don't know. I mean, everybody's good at something, right? So.
Okay, let's go to baseball, for example. So some of the most talented instructors that I've kind of come across, they played, but they maybe were not the best pro. And it's something about not being naturally, but let's say not as gifted.
Right.
And
it's less innate.
And then you had to do more work to understand how to do things. Let's say than someone who is just so much more gifted, and then that gifted person tries to explain how they do things, and it's like, I just jump 5 feet high in the air. That's how I do it. Like,
right.
What do you mean? Like, why don't you get this?
I'm Spud Webb.
And I feel like there's some architects that are like that too, that I've come across, that the really most talented ones, some of the most talented ones, they really couldn't explain what it is that they're doing. It was something in their head, and they had a hard time kind of getting something useful out of them. Whereas the ones that were thinking about practicing and teaching and something like that, something struggling through that, and then trying to figure out how to explain to somebody.
Isn't that interesting?
So, but I agree with you. The ones that are not practicing at all, I always had a hard time with as well. I just felt like, my goal is to be out there practicing. There's a lot of paper architects, meaning people doing hypothetical, theoretical projects.
Right.
And they're fun for a while, but at a certain moment, that's not what I wanted to do. And I really needed to work with people teachers that were kind of in muck, which is what practicing out in the world is
So
like.
mucky.
That it's difficult, it's challenging, and I'm always so impressed by those that are able to get something done, because it's not just a great idea, it's everything. It's just having that energy and everything you need to be able to sort of take something through from an idea to conception. It's just so much effort and energy and talent and everything. And so I kind of want that. I want to learn about how do you do all of it, not just have a great idea, but how do you execute it? How do you sort of, I don't know, take the client through for a year and the local governing boards, and how do you just have all the energy that you need and all the, I guess, wisdom and talent to kind of execute something properly. I just have the utmost respect for that. Yesterday we were talking to one of our colleagues, and did you see the files he sent? He sent me.
No, I haven't had a chance to look at them.
My goodness gracious. I mean, these are really beautiful houses in a very difficult community. And I just think, God, how did he get these things done?
Yeah.
And I know it needs not just an idea and like, oh, I'm done. I mean, it needs like that whole 2 years of just intensity to get the thing done. When you finally take those last photos and you think, oh, wow, that was a lot of work. And I'm so impressed by efforts like that. We've talked to Stuart Narofsky, who was the architect I'm talking about. He's been on a previous podcast. He was a really talented architect, and really was appreciative that he did our podcast, but also sent me this project just to sort of show us just this one. He was talking about this one neighborhood that's so difficult to work in, and how he was able to make some really great projects. And it's kind of inspiring to think, we all have challenges, and I think the tendency is to want to say, I won't fight for that anymore. I'll just kind of give up on that, and maybe we shouldn't do that. So anyway, I was impressed by his tenacity.
Yeah, well, I look forward to taking a look at the pictures, man. Sounds really cool.
All right, Doug. So it was about half an hour. This was our kind of just catch up, and we're going to get back into going back to some guests. I think that we talked about getting some other designers, other team members, part of the process. I think some people have asked about that. Sometimes getting clients. I actually honestly find getting a client more difficult. Most of them don't want to participate in these kind of forums, but certainly builders or landscape architect, for example, I've talked to some, and interior designers. I think we can definitely bring other team members on there. We'll look to clients and try to sort of think about that. I'm not sure why that is, but I just haven't really had a lot of luck if I've talked to some former clients that want to sit down for half an hour and talk about the process. I don't know. Maybe if I was on it was a legal podcast and my lawyer said, "Hey, Steve, want to be on the legal podcast?" I say, I don't know. I don't want to be on the legal podcast. So maybe it's something like that. I don't know. Maybe they just don't feel comfortable in this kind of forum. But I have not had a lot of luck with that. Maybe a client out there wants to reach out to us and say they're happy to talk about the process. That would be great. I mean, we welcome that.
Yeah, I think I've probably had one or two that might have some interest. I got to give that a little bit of thought. I mean, the challenge for me is that I'm a consultant for an architect, so they're not really my clients, most of them anyway. And so it's tough to kind of work around that. But every once in a while, I get my own clients, and they're interesting people. That's for sure.
Do you think having a builder would be a good idea in the future podcast?
I do. I mean, I think a builder would be interesting. I could definitely get a builder. I still think getting somebody from some large chain store who understands what people are buying in residential architecture could be very interesting for people to hear. I know you're not as big of a fan of that one, but
well, no. You know what I found with that is that if you go to Target, for example, who I know some people there in the design team, is that then parent company wants to monitor all. I don't know. I just find it so cumbersome when you're dealing with these big companies. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. They just want to kind of suddenly like, what are you going to ask them? What's this going to be about? And
well, we don't want to deal with it. Yeah, I get it.
I like the format. It's unconstrained. We can just do what we want.
It is America. Good thing.
Do you have any last thoughts about our kind of a little halftime podcast, and then we'll get back to our guests going forward. I've got some guys lined up that will be fun, and we will make sure, as we talked about, to reinforce that we're trying to provide resources for homeowners,
right,
and make it not so about architects.
My favorite saying is it's in the doing that the idea comes, right? So as we continue to work through this, we get mail and we talk to people and we get a better sense for where we fit. So I think, and I think we're doing that. I think that's happening slowly. So we've been doing this for a long time. In fact, we have all those shows that we did that we never even posted, early on, which was really fun.
Yeah.
So there's lots of content out there for us, and we'll keep listening to everybody, and we hope that they're listening to us.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point about the doing. I agree with you. Instead of sort of always planning and thinking about it, we just started doing it.
Just doing it.
And no one's listening anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We can do whatever we want. No one cares.
The three people listening, please send us an email.
All right, Doug. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you. We'll connect again.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
See you. Keep going.
Yep.
You've been listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. If you have any questions or want to give us any feedback on the show, feel free to reach us through our website at thedougandsteveshow.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.